everyone. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to read a K and just basically what does that mean and sort of the ins and outs of reading a K. And so first, one of the things I think that's important about reading a critical, reading any type of critique is just understanding that you won't know everything, right? And so thinking about, just the fact that, in order to read Deleuze critique, or in order to read Heidegger, or to read Nietzsche, or to read Lacan, or to read, any type of criticism. You don't necessarily have to read every body of work that author has produced, because ultimately what you have to grapple with is that you, even after reading all of those things, still might not come to the conclusion that you were hoping for, right? And since you might not come to that conclusion, then you should not hold that space open for, coming to one, rigid, understanding of what that text might mean, right? And that is sort of what many authors who ultimately do take original text and sort of reinterpret it, that's sort of what they are trying to get at, right? They're trying to say that, there's many different orientations to understanding text, and that, there's not really a right or there's not really a right way of understanding the text. There is wrong ways of understanding the text, but there's not really one particular right way of understanding it. And so thinking about it like that will sort of help you understand that even though you are new to critical debate, or understanding or reading critique, it is not it is not an insurmountable task. It is not something that is that's incompatible with your any learning style, right? And so first, when you think about critiques, it's not primarily about just sitting there and just daydreaming about things that don't exist. You're not like, oh, wow, let's ponder about, this day or that day, right? It's not about it's not like a hippie movement or something like that, right? It's actually, like really rigorous scholars who are, engaged in very important discussions about the way that the world is currently changing, and what is happening as a result. And so there are just many different fields where those things are happening. And so thinking about the vast amount of literature that doesn't say, or do one thing is really exciting, right? It's like, well, there's so many things that I can get into. There's so many different, combinations of authors, out there, that makes it that much more exciting to read. And so that is, what kind of brought me to critical debate. I remember being in, ninth grade, and like picking up a whiteness K and being like, what is this? And feeling so at home when I was reading it, because, it rang true to me. It was like, wow, this, very odd, very heavy jargon article, the things that I could parse out from it, I understood, right? And I didn't get it right away. Of course, I didn't get the whole totality of that article until maybe 10 years later, right? But when I was reading that article, it made sense. And the fact that it did make sense is super important, right? It's that it made me want to explore, and it made me want to get better at it, right? And that is sort of what comes with, critical debate. It's like you want to get better at being able to interpret and understand the critique. And if that's what you're feeling, then, critical debate is definitely for you. And so thinking about that is super important. Number two, I would say, is that you need to really understand that tags are important, but they don't need to be paragraphs. You know, they don't need to be, just like run on sentences that don't end. They need to be, thoughtful, stories that sort of articulate what the evidence is trying to get at, and think of critical debate as a story, right? It's like it's more talking about the foundation, the way the world works behind the scenes, the things that set up, the technologies that allow a certain thing to exist, right? It's about going layers deep into the foundation of a certain form of political thought, right? Or, and so thinking about how social systems work, and thinking about all of these different modes of governance, right? And thinking about how those things work. And everyone says a critique is just, a criticism of the foundations, the foundational assumptions of the world. And so thinking about that, that's okay. And so what I would suggest is just like going in and reading, annotating like you're in English class. You always have to go through a book and highlight the parts that you think are important. You always have to write questions next to lines that you don't understand. You always have to go look up words that don't make sense, right? And the same is true here. It's that when you're starting off learning critical debate, you have to be willing to become a student again, right? You're not a teacher yet. You have not mastered the ability to, to understand the theory without repeating its text, its primary text. And that should be your goal, right? Is to not use the words that the author is using, but understand it in a different context, right? And so thinking about that is super important. And knowing that all Ks need to have impacts, right? All critiques need to have impact. Just saying the world, works as it works is not an impact, right? You have to prove that the affirmative, makes that impact worse, and so thinking about that and thinking about the alternative, right? The alternative, is always, or more so, thinking about what would it, can the app be done in a world where the K links, you know, are true? NAF probably can't be done in that world, but the alternative can, right? The alternative can be probably resolve the links and can probably even maybe, solve the app, right? And that's the power of the criticism, is that it literally exists, so many layers deep that it might not only challenge the fundamental assumptions of the world, but that it might also, destabilize the paradigm that makes the affirmative coherent to begin with. And so thinking about the K like that allows you to sort of draw from many different theories, many different places. You are the scholar, right? You should be creating, you should be using your theoretical presumptions about a topic, and you should be creating this scholarship, right? It's not primarily from one author. You should not just regurgitate back to us what an author said. That's important. But what you need to do is be finding authors who agree with each other, right? They're trying to tell a story about something that, has been sort of there, but also absent at the same time. And so thinking about the criticism that way, I think is super important, because it allows you to sort of weaponize the affirmative's assumption that because the app is a good idea, that it should be done, right? Or that it is a theoretical assumption that we should make, right? Even with chaos, it's like chaos. Okay. Well, when you're reading a K against a chaos, it's always the K stand up and be like, no link. And what I was saying a couple times before in the video is that should be still your strategy, right? When they say get up and no link, you're like, great. All right, we're going to go for all the links, prove the link, kick the alt, can't go for your perm. And that should be the strategy, right? The K allows you to do so many things that, you primarily reading a counter plan might not let you do, right? And so thinking about it as, just being able to weaponize the offensive parts of the criticism against the defensive parts of the affirmative is super important.